Hello there. Welcome to the Maker Manager Money podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurs to inspire entrepreneurs to keep going and to inspire future entrepreneurs to just start. My name is Kyle Knowles, and today's guest is Glenn Poulos. Glenn is a sales expert, business coach, and author with over 3 decades of experience in the field. He is the co-founder of Gap Wireless, a leading distributor in mobile broadband infrastructure market, and current executive vice president and general manager of NWS, which purchased Gap Wireless 3 years ago. Glenn is the author of Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career Selling. His book offers practical sales strategies and insights based on real-world experience. Glenn is also an experienced speaker and podcaster with his podcast, Profit Powerhouse, talking sales, negotiation, and business insights. As a business coach, he enjoys sharing his knowledge, especially when it allows for flexibility and creativity. Welcome to the show, Glenn.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Where are you dialing in from?
I'm in Orlando, Florida right now, in the Orlando area. Yeah, and I can update you a little bit. There's been some sort of changes in my career over the last few weeks because I kind of timed out my deal when I sold the company and my 3 years is up and all that jazz, right? So new country, new job, new adventure, everything's new. But I'm happy to talk about the old as well and how I got here.
Yeah, so you're no longer with NWS, or are you with NWS?
Nope, I retired on New Year's Eve.
You had a 3-year engagement with them.
Yeah, sort of to hand over the reins and, sort of the normal way it goes with private equity, right? They want you to hang around and make sure they bought something that you said it was, prove it out, and then pass over all your knowledge and then get out of the way and let them do what they want to do, right? And so, yeah, had a good 3-year run with them in 15 years, but when it was private, and so about 18 years, and now I'm, believe it or not, starting from scratch, not from a company from scratch, but I mean a brand new career, so. It's my third sort of company. Sold 2 companies, and see if I can do it one more time.
All right, 3 times the charm. So what are you doing with the new company? What is the new company?
So Gap Wireless, ergo NWS, in Canada, was a distributor of telecom equipment. So buy equipment from around the world, present it to customers in the Canadian landscape, and then sell them the equipment, import it, and ship it to customers. And so doing the exact same thing, but a different kind of product, electrical utility testing products. So I'm in the power generation, companies that generate electricity and distribute electricity. The big guys like Duke and Florida Light and PG&E and all companies like that, and selling them equipment to help test their transformers and stuff like that. So I essentially bought a business in Florida, which allowed me to get a visa to work in the U.S. for 5 years, chunks of time, an E2 visa it's called. And so I will split my time between Canada and the U.S. in the cold months and Canada in the warm months. But I'm doing the same thing I did all along in a different country to a different customer with a different product, but the business is exactly the same. Representing companies from Europe and Asia and other parts around the world, importing those products and selling them to our U.S. customers, right?
Okay. So you had 2 Canadian companies and now you have a U.S. company.
That's right. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're working on some exciting stuff for 2025, and that's setting up a new sales team with this company.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the company, believe it or not, is 20 years old, and the owner was retiring. And I came across it when I was looking to get an E2 visa so I could spend more time in the warmer months in Florida, the business was intuitive to me. And so in anticipation of my tenure finishing up with the private equity guys, I bought the business, and then I had to wait for my one thing to time out. And now, so there's about 5 or 6 salespeople, a couple admins. So it's under 10 people. It's a few $1 million in turnover, much smaller than the business I was running, but I'm hoping to grow it and do the same things I did at Gap Wireless at the new business. Yeah. And so it's like going all the way back to 2007 when I started Gap, and all the way back to 1991 when I started my other company, MM Wave. And both of those were sold at the 15-year mark. But I don't plan on doing this for another 15 years. I don't have that much life ahead of me. So I gotta get in and get out over the next 3 to 5 years, and then try to, you know, bone up on my pickleball skills and retire.
Well, you're in a good state to retire down there in Florida. So
Yeah, definitely,
plenty
definitely.
of pickleball courts down there. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
so it was Wave, right? The first
Yeah.
company. You started from scratch. Did you
From
start that one?
scratch. Yep.
Gap Wireless from scratch?
From
And then
scratch. Yeah.
in this one, because I've had a couple of entrepreneurs on here who have done entrepreneurship through acquisition or ETA, just like
Yeah.
you did for this third company. So I know it's early days with this new company, but what are some of the differences between or from starting from scratch and buying a business?
Yeah, I mean, and this is just my personal opinion, right? I'm not, I didn't write this particular issue. I didn't write the book on it. I wrote the book on something else, which we can get to later. But the, you know, I realized at some point along the way that it just takes a long time to start a company from scratch. And there's plenty of really nice companies out there at every stage in their development. And honestly, I think it's just better to buy an existing business that already has, for instance, all the bank stuff set up, all the credit card stuff set up, all the tax IDs are set up, all of the real estate and operating business licenses, and it's all done, right? And I mean, that stuff is like takes forever, right? And you're not generating revenue when you're, you know, doing KYC with the bank to, explain what this company does and whatever. And I mean, there's a staff, there's probably a payroll, and accounting system, maybe ERP involved. There's customers, there's vendors, and you're just going in to apply your skills as you see them to this existing business. And so I don't think I would ever really, unless I really found an amazing mousetrap or whatever, start a business from scratch again, because I just don't personally. I don't have enough life runway ahead of me to do it. But I honestly, it's not necessary, right? And so I'm really of the mind that I wanted to buy something that had a business, a pedigree, customers knew it, had brand name and stuff like that, right? And so that's why I did it a different way. That's not why I didn't just move somewhere. And the other thing was, of course, for the E2 visa, I had to buy a business that had American employees, that was a growing concern in order to qualify. Otherwise, I would have to stay and do something in Canada. And the economy in the US is just a little bit more favorable for the entrepreneurial thing. And so I thought, if I'm going to do another business, I'm definitely doing it in the US. And having said that, if I'm going to do it in the US, I'm going to do it where it's warm in the winter. And so that's why it's in Florida.
Okay, that makes sense. So just a rough guesstimate, if you were starting NWS, say January 1st, we come on board and NWS, you're doing it full time and you're just starting from scratch. How long would it take you to get the level of brand recognition and customers that you have today? And I know it's 20 years old, but how long would it take you to get those customers and get your brand name out there?
Yeah. So, well, in 2007, when I started Gap Wireless, I had a business partner, and he was in another province. He was in Quebec. Like the first, and we hired a really smart engineer as well that first year, and we had a lady that was doing the front office, the bookkeeping and stuff. And that first year, I think we did like $1 million in sales. And, it was fairly lean times, right? And then the next year was like 3 million. And then it kind of went to 8 million. And then it's kind of, so honestly, if you ask me, my guess would be that it would be a 1 to 3 year venture to get it to being efficient, not efficient, that's not the word, but sort of, and not self-sufficient, but I mean, to the point where it was throwing off revenue, paying salaries, not feeding it from your savings or something like that. And I always tell people, whatever time you think it is, you want to double or triple the time, and you want to 5x the money, right? So, if you think you can do it for 10K in 3 months, it's going to be, 6 to 9 months, and it's going to be 5 times that amount of money, right? And it's just my rule of thumb. But everything takes 2-3 times as long, costs 5 times as much. And so, if you are going to start it from scratch, not saying don't do it, but make sure that you've put yourself at least a year of food and grocery money on the set aside, and rent money, so that you don't have to worry about paying yourself, and that you've got at least a year before you're even thinking about covering personal expenses, or you might have a spouse that's contributing or whatever, that's part of it, but your portion, you want to make sure you've got at least a year well clear of all your expenses, right?
That makes a lot of sense. So, and you spent some time before you started these other businesses. You did spend some time in corporate, right? Working for other organizations.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge company. It was a company that was a similar business to the one that I started. It was a sales company. It was fairly, there was offices in 5 cities in Canada. Each office had 4 or 5 sales guys. So it wasn't a tiny, it was a decent operation, right? 20, 25 guys, something like that. And it had been in business, this was in the mid 80s that I joined them, and I started my business in 91. They had been in business since the mid 70s or something. They had a very growing concern and a great business. And that's where I learned a lot of lessons in sales that I came up with for the book. We're working for those guys. And so I spent it was a 5 to 6 year sort of range that I was with them. And then that was when over the time, I'd realized that, you can do really well as a salesperson in terms of your income, which is not necessarily tied to any kind of degree or schooling, right? Like, doctors make a lot of money, but they also have to go to school for 10 years, right? Like a sales guy can get a technical diploma, 2-year technical diploma, then go work for a sales company. And if they're any good, they could be making 200 grand in the second year, right? And it's a very unique business that way. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. If I'm making 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever, and there's 4 other guys in my office, how much is the owner making? Right. And then I thought, you know what, it'd be easier if I was the owner. Then I get paid every time everyone sells, not just when I sell. Right. Which is why I decided to jump and start a sales company.
And I noticed on LinkedIn you had you mentioned AI, kind of your banner.
Yeah, that's a new thing that I'm starting as well. That is actually from scratch. So it's funny. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. In addition to the business, I'm also doing trying to sort of bootstrap an initiative in AI where to take the things I had learned at the old business about automation and AI and what I'd adopted and try to share it with other businesses, small SMBs, and to see if there's something there. And obviously I'm dividing my time and gingerly, because I got to take care of my main business. I just wanted to see, while this AI is on such a exponential ramp, if there's a piece that I could play. And then if it really hits pay dirt, I would probably partner up with some other people that could give 120% of their time, because I can't give 100% of my time to it, because I have to spend a lot of time at my day job, right? And so that's the idea behind the AI initiative.
So is it more consulting services or actual tools that?
Yeah, it would be going into businesses, looking for where they have or haven't adopted AI, and finding out where some of the bottlenecks are in their business, whether it's in finance and reporting, production, quality assurance, quoting, order processing, financial reporting, and adopting, developing, and training on custom AI agents, whether they're written by the company or, a third-party agent, you're selling them or installing for them and showing them how to use. Not the least of which would be onboarding and helping people to get the best out of things like Copilot and Gemini and stuff like that, where they may be paying for the licenses, but how do they actually get their money's worth out of it, right? And so, yeah, so I've been loosely working on that and having modest interest from customers. And so started doing some presentations and sort of see where it goes, right? And it's kind of a passion project. And so I'm taking it very seriously, but I do have a day job too, right? So.
Right. So what AI tools and workflows have you adopted then?
So the main ones that where there's been traction are in the area of commercial quoting automation. So where a lot of information comes into you and you need to process it and provide custom proposals, whether it's RFQs or RFPs or things like that, and provide responses to these bids, where that's the bottleneck, is getting all these RFPs responded to in a timely manner. Can be very draining on your staff. and the quality can vary depending upon which person is actually writing the document. Sort of document processing where, for instance, construction firms or other people where they're taking in a lot of drawings and then they need to analyze the drawings and then create workflows and bill of materials and action plans out of these drawings, which normally has to be done by hand in a way, like manually. You got to look at the drawing. Oh, I need all these things. I got to order all this equipment. I need these many cranes. And so those are the two areas where I've promoted a few things where there's starting to be traction. And, but it is very early days. I'd like to try to see some things come along in the, that are more repeatable, like, sort of co-pilot adaptation. So, go in, assess your team, who's beginner, intermediate, and advanced in AI, and then do 12-week seminars to get each one of those groups up to their highest potential with those standard off-the-shelf tools like ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever. Make sure all the guardrails are installed in their business so they're not sharing corporate secrets or, private information and things like that. And then, and that's something where it could be systematized and resold over and over again.
And in your personal life and the things that you're working on individually, what tools do you use day in and day out?
Yeah, so the most tool that I use, which come as no surprise, is ChatGPT, and I literally use it for everything, right? And and I have it on all my devices. I give it voice commands. I talk to it. I literally, every time I'm posed with a question that I have to ask myself or whatever, I probably going to pose it to ChatGPT at the same time. Like at lunch today, I'm trying to monitor my weight and stuff, and I didn't know how much I was eating. I just took a photo of it and I said, how many calories is this, right? And it even said, like, underneath the chicken, it looks like there's some potatoes. So like it even saw that it looked like I was hiding food, and it came up with like 700 and some odd calories. And it saw the gravy, and it was amazing, right? Because if I was doing it, I'm going, oh, a little bit of potatoes and some chicken, and like, oh, that's, 450 calories, but I forgot to add in the gravy at 125 calories, right? I just, like, my brain would just sort of filter that out as being inconvenient to care about. And, but most documents, agendas and meetings and other things, I'm always trying to make sure I'm thinking about it from all the different angles, right? And I don't have time to think them up because I would take a day, whereas I can put it in. I've said, what have I thought? What have I not thought about? What else do I need to think about? Or what are 3 other ways I could approach this? Or how would you react if I presented this? And, I love giving it scenarios like that. Right. So, and, like job descriptions and letters to customers and, all sorts of preamble and stuff like that. It's amazing for that kind of stuff.
It's incredible. And I applaud you and others of our age and generation using the tools, because I think a lot of people aren't, and they don't understand there's a lot of misinformation in the media and things like that about AI, but people just need to start playing with it. And I love your use case for calories. I'm tracking my calories too. And I've never used it. I've never taken a picture and asked ChatGPT, but I'm going to next time. I'm always looking at, boxes or on the back of things, or, typing things in and looking them up. But that's a great use case. And really the use case as being a thought partner is one of the best use cases, having conversations with ChatGPT. And it's really getting to know you. It's really getting to know me because it's remembering our conversations. And so it'll bring up things I talked about 4 weeks ago and bring those into the conversation. So thanks for sharing those AI tools and workflows. Since you're a sales expert and you've written this book, and I want to get to the book, Never Sit in the Lobby, what's the most significant misconception people have about sales?
Well, the one I always like point to right away is confusing the difference between sales and marketing and not knowing the difference between the two of them. And I really simplify it and dumb it down that when you're in front of a customer and you're doing a proposal and you're showing them the features and benefits and, or trying to close the business, that's selling. Everything else is marketing and trying to get you in front of that client. And so figure out which department you want to work in and apply for it there, right? Like, in other words, a sales guy who's sitting on his comfortable chair in his home office with 3 monitors and all his other fancy stuff, playing around on LinkedIn, that's marketing. That's not sales, right? And if that's what they really want to do, then they should be on the lead generation side or whatever, which again, I call marketing. The real sales guy doesn't want anything to do. That's anathema to him. He wants, or however they say that, he wants to be in front of clients closing deals, right? And so, make sure you pick where you want to be, right? And sales guys can be very expensive. You don't want them. A lot of that lead generation stuff can be farmed out to much other different levels in your stack of employees, and so you don't want your most expensive resource, dialing for dollars or something like that, right? And so that's one of the biggest things about mistakes is confusing marketing with sales.
Okay, I love that answer. So what's the biggest misconception of someone who's in sales?
Okay, well, like for me, and this is what's the word, like not unconventional, but sort of people like to argue with me about that. I'm some tongue-tied for the word, but anyways, what I'm going to say is, like, for me, it's all about being in front of customers. I don't really believe that any of the products that I sell can actually be sold over Zoom or Teams calls. You could do a demo, you could maybe have a technical session or whatever. But at the end of the day, the guy that's getting the order probably making a lot of calls to that customer face to face. And you can argue as much as you want, but I still, the example I always give is, okay, fine, you're successful, your business is super successful, you're making bags of money, and guess what? Now you can afford a jet. And guess what? I sell jets. And I would like to invite you to a Teams call where I'm going to virtually introduce you to the potential product that you're going to own. I'd like to virtually introduce you to the pilot that's going to fly your plane, and virtually introduce you to the crew that's going to take care of you when you're in flight. I'll offer you a complimentary beverage that you can't drink because you're on Teams. And let's walk you up. I'll walk up the stairs to your jet while you sit in your chair at your office and not get a ride. And then we'll go on a ride on the plane. And then at the end, you're going to cut me a check for $30 million. And it's like, no, I think I want to go for a ride on that jet before I give you $30 million. It's like, exactly. I treat everything like a $30 million jet. The guy who's getting the deal is picking you up in a nice car. He's treating you nicely on the way there. He's walking you up the stairs to the plane, making sure you're comfortable, flying you, giving you the best experience, and learning everything there is to know about it. So the mistake, I think, is people think they can do it remotely. I can do it from home. I can do it from the comfort of my chair. I'm a firm believer in face-to-face selling wherever and whenever possible, all within the guidelines that it's not always easy to get in front of people now, but you need to get in front of them at some point, right? And not every call needs to be face-to-face. But how are you going to know what competitors, if you may not want to share it with you, but if you're in his building and you're demonstrating your particular product, whether it's software, hardware, or whatever, how are you going to see the coffee mugs, what's written on those coffee mugs, unless you're in the building, right? And he might pick it up on the Zoom call and you'll see, hey, your biggest competitors, he's drinking out of that guy's coffee mug, right? But you got to get there so you can see what they're doing now, how they're doing it, and that the product you're trying to sell them, they've got 9 other products like that from a competitor, and then you're thinking, wow, maybe he's just using me to keep competitor 1 honest for the 10th machine, right? And so that's the guidance and governance I try to place on sales guys and gals, of course, too.
You also do coaching, right? You do coaching and consulting. And is that mostly for entrepreneurs, or is that mostly for sales?
Yeah, so most of the coaching that I do is more on a collaborative basis. So I'm not an hourly, charged by the hour, charged by the quarter coach. I'm actually working with entrepreneurs or senior executives at businesses or whatever in really any department. But I mean, my role's always been general manager. So sales always reported to me, but so did marketing and finance and operations. And I'm sharing information with people of a similar sort of background and level as myself, and I'm working on ways of collaborating so that it's kind of like a pay it forward, what goes around comes around kind of thing, in the sense that I'm not really it's not really something that I'm charging for, but I do it a lot because first of all, when you're giving coaching advice and helping people restructure their sales force or realign their management team, and it's free. Well, you know, if they don't like the product that I've delivered, then I can refund their misery for free, right? Because it hasn't cost them anything.
Right.
And so if I start charging, no matter how much it is, then it becomes a completely different. It's a whole business that I don't run. I don't run a professional. Some people do, but I mean, I'm doing it because the companies and they interest me, and I'm thinking down the road, I can collaborate with you, you can collaborate with me, and later it will return itself in kind. And that's the coaching. And and you'd be surprised how many people reach out to me and they're saying, hey, can you help me? A lot of them are asking me about sales department issues and compensation and stuff like that. And I mean, within my ability to spend time with them, I do it, and I trade it for future opportunities to collaborate.
That makes sense. It's a working
Yeah,
opportunity for you as well. So, okay, so let's talk about your book. I wanted to
sure.
because I just finished it this morning, but the book 57, the subtitle, so it's Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career Selling. How did you settle on 57? It seems like a number that's important. I don't know if it is or not, but 57 seems
Yeah.
like a specific
Yeah.
number.
Yeah. The funny thing is, no, I mean, the title was, I had a lot of help on that title from one of the editors because they didn't like my title. And they said, based on keyword searches, you're not going to sell any books. And so, literally I can't remember if it was the copy editor, the content editor. There's so many editors that you need to use when you write a book. But
Yeah.
thing, and that's really where it came out with. It's not like there's 57 chapters or it's and the Never Sit in the Lobby was the most catchy one that she liked because they all have kind of catchy names or whatever, right? And one of the chapters is Never Sit in the Lobby, and so that became the title of the book. And so unfortunately there's some great story behind it, but there was good reason to take her advice and stuff, right? And so far. And so it is selling some books. So I guess she was right.
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation, and I listened to it. That was you
Yes,
reading it, and
it was. Yeah.
I wasn't looking at it, I was just taking notes as I was listening. But are each of those noted? Is there a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, no, there's not.
Okay.
And so there are chapters and the chapters don't have numbers. And then within the chapters are sub groupings that are kind of loosely connected to each other.
Yeah.
And so you'll find a heading at the beginning of each section and then 3 or 4 or 5 factors inside of it.
Right.
And some factors have 2 factors in them. So I can't guarantee, that it's exactly 57. It's close enough for government work, but that's kind of the idea behind it, right? It's just kind of like a Heinz 57 of things to do. And as you've come to learn from having listened to it or whatever, it's not just about selling, right? It's like,
Right.
I say it's how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers and to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And what do you mean by don't be a pleasure to do business? Well, don't be a pain in the ass. That's what I mean, right?
Right.
And so it's like, why do you have like etiquette about how to eat a meal in your book, right? And I'm like, well, because if you read the stories about some of the people I've gone to lunch with and how they've embarrassed me or whatever, or what not to do, what to do, that's the reason why. Because if you're out on lunch with a client, they're making huge assessments about you based on what you order, how you eat, where you sit, how you behave, right?
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time on rapport and listening and all the ways to not be one of those annoying salespeople that we all don't like getting bothered by.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I thought, wow, if I was starting out in sales, and even if I was in sales for a long time, this book would give me ideas on how to improve. And I really appreciate it. And I'm actually already started implementing. You have some simple suggestions for email etiquette, for
Yeah. Oh yeah.
leaving voicemails,
Yeah.
following up, these kinds of things that I've already started implementing. One thing I wanted to talk about, and let's just talk about that title, "Never Sit in the Lobby," because
Sure.
going into the book, I was like, what does this mean? Never sitting in the lobby, never
Yes.
go into a lobby,
Right.
never, what does it mean? So why don't you explain to the audience, like, what
Yeah.
never sit in the
Yeah.
lobby?
Like some people are like, never sit in the lobby. Does that mean never sit? Should I sit in my car? And I'm like, well, if you're early, you should sit in your car, because once you get to the lobby, you should never sit down. And so the whole point is again, a lot of these are rapid fire rules, right? And they don't require a lot of explanation. But the whole idea behind never sit in the lobby is that if you go in the lobby and you introduce yourself and you're waiting for your client to come down, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll sort of stare at the wall and look at the awards, or they'll pick up company magazines or brochures, flip through them, or the worst case now, kiss of death, everyone gets on their phone, right? And once they get zoned out on their phone and they're flipping through, talking to the wife about the milk and bread that's needed, or, flipping through reels on Instagram or whatever, the guy walks in, you didn't even notice the door open, you didn't need it, and all of a sudden he's like, "Are you Glenn?" And and I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then I got to stumble to put my phone away. I'm sitting down. Of course, for me, the guy was always 6'4" tall, and I'm only 5'6", so I have to rise up from the chair, and then I'm still a foot shorter than the guy, right? And so for me, I always want to be standing at attention, waiting for them to come in. My phone's in my pocket. I'm not playing around with anything, and so I'm never sitting in the lobby. But in addition to that, the next rule that goes right after that is I always have something in my hand and something in my mind. So I have something I'm going to give the person and something I'm going to say right away. I have not lost for any words, and because a lot of times you're not given a lot of time because of the ways and means of how you ended up in the lobby. It's because you couldn't get a proper meeting, but he said he would meet you in the lobby, or you could drop something off, so you need to make the best use of your time. And so I always have something in my hand, like the quote, the literature, maybe it's a promo item, whatever it is, to give them, and something to say to them right away. Something in your hand and something in your mind. And then there's a bunch of other ones that flow after it, which we can get into at your convenience.
So there's literally 55 others.
There is indeed.
According
Yeah.
to your copy editor who counted everyone.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
The next one is always ask for a mini tour, right? And
I love that.
People are like, what is a mini tour, right? A mini tour is a tour that's mini, right? It just doesn't take all day.
And you say mini because you don't want them to think, I don't have time for this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're saying, hey, can I get a mini tour? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're putting this new thing in production. You're putting this new thing in the warehouse. You're putting this new thing in the office or in finance or whatever. Could you just take me walk through, show me the new setup, show me where the equipment's going to go, show me the situation it's going to work in. And if they hum and haw a little bit, you've already said it was mini and it's, it's going to be quick, whatever. If they hum and haw, say, look, I promise I won't sell any encyclopedias. Just want to have a quick look. Right. And they're like, okay, fine, let's go for a walk. Right. So he takes you through that important door that blocks the office from from the lobby. Right. Now you're in the inner sanctum. That's when you get to start shining with the next group of rules, right? Which is, the call book factor and never forget a face, right? So if you're there early, you should show up early because, early is on time and on time is late. And when you're in the parking lot waiting for 1 or 2 minutes before your meeting, so you don't have to stand for long, you go to your phone, you call up that customer, and you recall every person there that you've ever met. It might be one person, it might be 10. But you have to remember every person's face. And so you look at Jack and you're like, what is Jack? Okay, I remember Jack. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And what you're doing is you're moving Jack's face from long-term ROM, read-only memory, to high seek time, random access memory at the front of your brain. Because the problem is it's in there, but you can't instantly grab it when you're walking for your mini tour. And so you've remembered everybody. So that when you're walking down the hall towards the new lab, and then guess who walks by? Is Bob. And say, hey, Bob, how's it going? And the guy's like, oh, right, Glenn. Oh, yeah. And he had that pregnant pause, which led me to believe that he didn't remember me. Eventually, he remembered me. But imagine if the tables were turned and I didn't do the never forget a face. And I walked in, got the mini tour. Bob walks by me and says, hey, Glenn, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, hey, hey. And then he's already 20 feet away. Bob, you know, and I'm screaming, I do remember you. I do remember you.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, that jerk didn't remember me. What a jerk. Meanwhile, the one, when you do remember, they're like, oh, Glenn, he's such a pleasure to do business with.
Right.
Right. Makes a huge difference. And, you know, and so, and while you're walking down the hall, you're looking on everyone's desk. What coffee mugs are they? What t-shirts are they wearing? What mouse pads are they using? What pens do they have? Who gave the freebies? Where's your competitive equipment? What other equipment that you sell that they use that you didn't even know they buy? You know, you're taking mental note of all of that stuff on your mini tour, right?
Right.
And then, you know, yeah, and then you get in and you get out. And typically when I'm on those mini tours or whatever, I'm saying, you know what, like Bob, I had something I wanted to go over with Bob. It's funny, we bumped into him. Can you drop me by his desk on the way by? And then he takes me by Bob's desk. Hey, Bob, can I get 2 minutes? I just wanted to have a quick chat with you. He's like, sure. You know, and then Bob says to Jack, who you're visiting, oh, I'll walk him out, right? And then throughout that whole exchange, what I end up doing is programming and setting up a bunch of other meetings for other weeks where I know that, so that I don't have to be dialing for meetings from the office. Most of my weeks are already set up because all my meetings were set up at the meeting before the meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's a couple other things I want to talk about from the book.
Go ahead.
One of them is you say quite often in the book, you only get forever to make another impression. Like I had to like turn that over. Like,
yeah.
Talk about what that means. I mean, I had to keep turning it over.
Well, yeah, because it goes back to what your mom taught you, right? Which is you only get you only get a chance to make one first impression, right? And I'm like, well, that's actually not true. Like, it's true, Mom. You do how to make a good first impression, but every impression you make after that is an impression. And so the point is even if you make a good first impression, and then later the boss walks by your desk and sees that you're on social media every time he walks by, those impressions become the latest impressions.
Yeah.
And they are the impressions that he remembers, not that you were nice the first day you came to work. And so my whole thing is that when you're a young person building your career, you're basically mapping out, where do I want to be and who do I need to kill in order to get there, right? Because basically you're in the, inside sales, there's 20 guys. Then you get to outside sales, there's 5 of those. Then you get sales manager, there's 2 of those. Then you get director of sales, there's 1. Then there's a chief revenue, there's only 1 of those jobs. And then there's the CEO. And where do you want to end up? You got to figure that out. I want to be CRO. Okay. Well, that's 1 job. So I've got to go from inside sales. Then I got to get a sales. Well, I'm in Toronto. I can go here. Then I can get then I got to do this. And so every time the guy who could get me that job in Toronto walks by, I'm going to make sure I'm giving him the best impression possible. I'm saying, like, hey, Rick, blah, blah, blah. I want to ask you, I got this deal cooking, so that when he's thinking about who to promote the next time, there's only one name that pops into his brain over and over and over again. And so always be making an amazing impression at work, because you are always making an impression at work. And so that's the whole idea behind it.
Yeah, I really like that. And you talk about, I guess a lot of the talk is overcoming maybe a stereotype. I come from marketing, right? And so maybe a stereotype that I see with salespeople is the insincerity, right? But you talk throughout the book about being genuine. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what people can work on to make sure that they're coming across as genuine and not?
Yes. Well, one of the chapters on that is another tongue twister called implied familiarity also breeds contempt, right? And so I'm always telling people, don't infer anything until it's real. You know what I mean? Like, don't infer based on someone's behavior that you've got rapport. You need to build the rapport naturally, and until you know that it's firmly established. And so what I mean by implied familiarity also breeds contempt is basically, there's a saying, familiarity breeds contempt, right? So the example I give is, I grew up in Toronto. My parents used to go to Florida all the time. I'm in Florida now, no surprise, but we used to drive down, right? And my parents always took 3 days, all day drives, 3 kids in the back, parents in the front. by the time I got to Florida, I wanted to kill my brother and sister, right? Why? Because I was like so hyper familiarized with them, basically one on each arm, like we're squished in the back of the car, right? And you're like hitting each other and and it's funny, or you go on a trip with someone that you're really fond of and you decide, hey, why don't we just share a hotel room? And by the end of it, you can't stand them because of the sounds they make when they brush their teeth and the noises they make, and it's hyper familiarizing them and it becomes annoying. And so what I found is that the most annoying salespeople are the ones that walk in and pretend like they know you. And so I give the example of seeing the photo behind the guy's desk where he's fishing with another guy and he's holding up the fish. And, and so I say, oh my God, like I love fishing. We should go fishing. Right. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, well, the fish there, right, and he looks back, he goes, oh my God. He says, that's my ex-father-in-law. I friggin' hate that guy. I'm divorced. That guy's a nightmare. I hate fishing. I only went fishing because my wife made me go fishing. Thank God I'm divorced. Grabs the photo, throws it in the garbage. And now I've completely taken this guy to a state of absolute, insanity. How do I bring him back from that? Right. Whereas I should have found out through a series of conversations like, oh, are you a fisherman? Or what's the story behind the golf club that's hanging on the wall, right? Why do you have a golf, not, oh, let's go golfing, right? Like, because, the guy doesn't even know you, right? So, that's one of the ways of building rapport in a genuine manner, right? And also I talk about active listening, right? So, where God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you do the math kind of thing. And, always be trying to practice active listening, which I go on ad nauseum in the book, right? And how to do it and how to learn how to do it and how to become a good listener. Because, if you're just like, if the guy starts talking, you're like, oh, our box does that. And, oh, wait a minute, we have a box that does that. And, this stuff becomes so annoying, right? And it's like, how do I get rid of this guy? So those are just some comments on rapport and genuine behavior.
Right. And I really like the section on where you're talking about talking too much, like the sale basically already made, and then you're going to throw in a bunch of other stuff that could potentially kill the sale.
Don't sell past the close. When you get the PO, shut up, right? And just get up and leave. So many people blow it at that point, right?
I wish we had a lot more time because there's so many other things I want to talk about in the book. The last question I'll ask you about to talk about in the book, you have some interesting comments on CRM. And I'm, coming from marketing, and I've rolled out CRM platforms multiple times for Salesforces. And I really like what you said. You're not a hater of CRM, but there are some specific things that you have noticed over the years with CRM systems. Do you want to just share real briefly your thoughts about CRM?
I find that the really top producing sales reps, have the most emptiest CRM, right? And that, that's where you're confusing marketing with selling, right? That's another one of those things, right? Where, and it's like, everything's got to be in the CRM, right? Okay, well, why? Right. And so I agree that there's certain elements of things that do need to be in the CRM or what have you, but I don't believe that the high producing sales assets are also the best administrators, right? And the CRM is kind of an administrivia kind of a thing. And, I find that people, my dad used to say they put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? And, and so, I'm always at odds with what to demand we track, but I find that companies are best served by figuring out their optimal deal size and saying, look, everything above that's got to be and your dates need to be up to date, but I don't need to know every note and what have you. And the one thing that I found, the reason why is because I fell victim to this myself, having put in so many CRMs, that I would go to a sales guy and I would say, hey, how to go at T-Mobile, that call. And he's like, well, it's in the CRM. Didn't you read it? And I'm like, well, no, can you just tell me? He's like, no, I can't tell you. If I have to put it in the CRM, then that's where you got to read it. Why do I have to tell you twice? And and so if the executives are not running their business in the CRM, why should the salespeople? And so it's a real love-hate relationship for me. And but I do believe that the big deals need to be in there, and you need to have the probability right, where you're at in the stage, and the close date, right? And so that you can share that with your vendors and your divisions, or whoever needs to know about the forecast and the funnel.
I just love how you also pointed out that your customer data, the people doing the ordering, placing the orders, a lot of times are different than the people that you're selling to, and so there's always a disconnect between
The accounting system and the CRM
or the ERP, the accounting system, the order entry, and that throughout my career was like we had to go to the order entry system if we wanted to contact customers to tell them,
exactly
delays or anything like that. We couldn't go to CRM, and like you said,
that's a huge
field or not correct, and you don't want your most expensive resource having office days to enter a whole bunch of information into CRM. So I appreciate
literally every system I've had has been that problem where ERP accounting was disconnected from the sales opportunity side of the thing, except for one, and that they were directly tied together and could see each other. But the system was an ERP and it was so complicated the sales guys couldn't use it. And so I've never won that particular connectivity thing, right? And some people spend millions of dollars gluing the accounting data to the sales, and to what end, I'm not so sure, right? So,
well, thank you so much for sharing some insight into your book. We'll put links to the book in the show notes and to your podcast and things like that. I just have some personal questions to wrap up with. The first one is, what's the book besides yours that you recommend the most to people?
That's funny. I mean, the funny thing is I don't actually read a lot. So, it's not like I'm the 4-minute this or the 15-minute whatever. And I don't have the most impactful book for me though was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which I can explain quickly in a second, but also, the book, Persuasion was super impactful on me. The very first one, and the rule of reciprocity and all that. That's such a great book on motivating and how people are motivated, right? So Persuasion, and then his follow-on books, I think I read most of them and picked up a little bit more tidbits. But, The Power of Now is one which basically allows you to focus on the difference between you and your ego, and to focus on the now that you're living in versus, and it's just been so helpful, especially with all the changes that I've always gone through, buying the business, starting a business, selling a business, working for this, changing that, and I get so caught up in my ego, and I, it allows me to sort of preemptively deal with my demons, right? And try to focus on what's important and not worrying about things that don't matter and stuff like that. So Eckhart Tolle's got some great books, and so that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I haven't read The Power of Now, but I'm going to put it in the queue for sure. So thanks for the recommendation. Okay, this is a lightning round of questions. Your favorite candy bar?
Oh, so I'm like a hard candy and like fudge. So I like fudge, like from England, and Miss Tilly's fudge and stuff like that. If it would be a chocolate bar, it would probably be like Heath bar in the US, or like the Score bar in Canada, which has kind of got like hard caramel inside with chocolate and stuff. I'm a candy holic. My grandfather owned a candy store. He was a candy maker. So, yeah.
And what happened to the store then? Is someone else running?
So he had the store right up until he died, but he died with all the recipes in his brain, never passed them on. And so, so we weren't able to continue the legacy.
Yeah. I'm a candy holic too. So,
I love candy.
That would be fascinating if someone in my family had a candy store. So favorite music artist?
Yeah. So favorite music artists have to be Supertramp, because that was the band I loved the most when I was 17. And that's how I figure out how old people are. I ask what their favorite album is, and I take 17 years and I can figure out the year they were born.
Yeah.
And so I love Supertramp and, the Pink Floyd and stuff like that.
Okay. Favorite cereal?
Favorite cereal was sort of Fruit Loops and Count Chocula and Lucky Charms.
Mac or PC?
Love Macs, but I'm PC all the way. Yeah.
Google or Microsoft?
Well, right now I'm Microsoft, but I used to be Google. And then the corporation changed it. I had to change with it. But for years I was Google, and now I'm Microsoft.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs. Yeah. I have 2 French bulldogs. Yeah.
Phantom or Les Mis?
So I go to a lot of plays. I have season tickets in Canada to the Mirvish, which is the Broadway of Canada. I'm sorry to ramble on. And I love plays. And those are the 2 plays I hate the most. And so neither, unfortunately. I don't like either one of those plays. And I've seen them both more than once. There's a lot of plays that I love. And,
What would be your top musical then?
probably like Wicked or something like that, maybe.
I love the answer. So just a couple more questions. One of these I stole from your book. If I invite you to karaoke night, what's your go-to song?
Yeah. So it used to be Love on the Rocks by Neil Diamond, but now it's Sweet Caroline.
Neil Diamond. Love it. Last 2 questions, Glenn, and thank you for being so generous with your time. What's the worst thing about being an entrepreneur, and what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
The money for both, yeah. Like, and so I love the freedom of not like having taken on a whole realm of bosses when I sold the business. Man, that was really, really hard for me, and they're nice people and all that jazz. But as an entrepreneur, after you get the hang of it or whatever, it's like you want to make a change in marketing, you make a change, right? You want to change the colors of the business, you change the colors, right? And it's like, I don't need to argue with you about it. And they're like, oh, we need a steering committee and that's got to go upstairs to the corporate and make sure it meets our, responsibility matrix or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, right? So, but being an entrepreneur, get all that freedom, but you can also be super poor at times, be worried about the guarantees for the banks and whatever, but you can also make bags of money. And, so it's really, really relates to that. And there's really no way, and really, there's no other way really to like jack up your net worth than to have a business. It's the only way, really. I mean, you can become a doctor and you make 400 grand a year, but in Canada, half that goes to tax, pretty much the same amount in the US, it's, and you got to work huge hours and whatever. And it's only 400 grand, right? I mean, sales guys, I've met sales guys that made over $1 million and they barely graduated college, right? And so on the earnings side, but a business has this unlimited leverage, right? And so, and you get a 5 to 10 times multiple on your profits when you sell it, right? So, you make $1 million profit, you could likely sell it for 4.5 to 5.5 times your EBITDA, which, put a $5 million check in that's a pretty good retirement fund for most people, right?
It is. Yeah, I love the answer, Glenn. And Glenn, again, thank you so much for being generous with your time. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I think the audience is going to learn so much about sales and entrepreneurship from this conversation.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, great being here. You're welcome.